Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing a 2-month GST holiday on a suite of holiday-themed items and $250 checks for all working Canadians who made less than $150,000 in 2023. He will, however, need opposition support to pass the plan. Will he get it? With us now to talk about that, Conservative ethics critic Michael Barrett and NDP Deputy Finance critic Taylor Bachrach. Hi to both of you. Thank you very much for making the time. Mr. Barrett, the first question is a simple one. Will your party support it?
Well, we haven't seen the legislation yet. We had an announcement by the Prime Minister today. Those measures appear to be a temporary tax trick. We know that in the new year they are raising the price, they're raising the tax on alcohol as they do every year. We know that they're going to raise the carbon tax again in the new year with their plans to quadruple it. That'll raise the price of food for Canadians, the price to put gas in their cars and to heat their homes. So those things we know based on legislation that the Liberals and the NDP have supported in the House of Commons. We haven't seen legislation on this. So as soon as they introduce it, we'll take it to caucus, and as a group of common sense Conservatives, we'll review it.
Let me reframe the question then. In principle, do the Conservatives support a 2-month holiday on GST for the items that the Prime Minister's office released today?
What we've committed to do is to permanently remove the carbon tax for everyone and to take the GST off homes under $1 million to save Canadians tens of thousands of dollars. So those are
does that mean that you don't support this?
Those are permanent tax cuts for all Canadians. We haven't proposed any temporary tax cuts for just some people.
Do I interpret from that you will not support in principle something like this? And I have to challenge you on that because the framing that your party, has put forward very consistently around getting rid of the carbon tax is one around affordability, right? Life is not affordable for Canadians. We hear that from your leader all the time. Therefore, we want to bring in a tax cut to make things more affordable. I understand your desire to see the carbon tax cut. The government has said that they're not going to do that. They are offering other relief when it comes to affordability. How can you say to Canadians you're going to put politics above that?
Well, it's simply not putting politics above it. We have to see the legislation that the government is going to propose. They made an announcement today. This comes on the heels.
It's a detailed announcement, with all due respect, though. It's not like it's just like, oh, some things might get GST. They put a list out there.
Yes, we know that they plan to take the tax off Christmas trees that you buy after December 14th. This is after 9 years where in this country, food price inflation is 39% or 36% higher than our neighbors to the south in the United States. We know that 25% of Canadians are using food banks, which is certainly much higher than the 6 and change percent unemployment rate in this country. We know that hundreds of thousands of kids are going to school hungry because of the effect of the carbon tax raising the price on food in this country. So this is what...
I'm not disagreeing with the facts you're putting on the table of the way people are suffering. I'm asking how you can look at those people suffering and say, because you'd rather see a carbon tax cut, you're not going to support something that the government is proposing that would offer a different kind of relief.
We can offer permanent relief today to Canadians by taking the carbon tax off absolutely everything. This is a sleight of hand by Justin Trudeau to distract Canadians from the real consequences of his inflationary spending and, frankly, the economic vandalism that he's perpetrated.
I want to bring in Mr. Bachrach, and I have to ask you quite bluntly, why is your party supporting the Liberals on this when your leader, Mr. Singh, was explicit that it did not go nearly as far as you would like to see it go? You wanted it to cover more stuff and you wanted it to be permanent. Why do you continue to support the Prime Minister and his party when you say this falls so short?
Well, thanks, Vassy. First of all, like we are hearing from Canadians, there's a broad swath of the Canadian public that's struggling to make ends meet. And last week we were up demanding that the government take the GST off a whole host of essentials, including home heating, kids' clothes, phone and internet bills. It appears the Prime Minister has caved to that demand and put forward, in classic Liberal fashion, put forward a lesser offer to Canadians. But at the same time, what they've put forward will help people. It's going to put money in their pockets and it's going to reduce the cost of some essentials for a period of time. We would make it permanent. We would do more. We would go further. But our commitment, when we ended the agreement, was to take everything that the government brings forward in the House on a case-by-case basis, look at the merits, and vote in the best interest of Canadians. So we're coming into the Christmas season. Families are going to be stretched. Here's something that's going to give them some help. I think it would be irresponsible not to support that and get them the help that they need.
But aren't you just also sending the message to Canadians that if the Liberals do a tiny bit of what the NDP likes, then you're willing to keep them in power? And isn't that a difficult message for Canadians to reconcile with?
This isn't about sending messages. It's not about the kind of political games that Michael was talking about. This is about getting help to Canadians. It's that simple. So people are watching this. They're looking at Christmas coming up. They're looking at their paychecks and the cost of things in the store, and they're stressed. This is what they're telling me. They're like, we're worried. We're not going to be able to make ends meet. We're not going to be able to put presents under the tree. We're not going to be able to pay our bills. This is an incredibly stressful time of year for people. And so if the government is willing to put something on the table that lowers people's bills, that gives them some of that relief at such a critical time of year, how can we say no to that?
Because today, actually, in a way, Mr. Singh did. He said, when I'm prime minister, I will make it permanent.
Sure, absolutely.
He could be prime minister if your party was willing to force an election, but you're unwilling to because you don't think he's going to be prime minister, I think.
Coming into Christmas, I think the question, whether Canadians want an election at Christmas or they want $250 and a cut to the GST on things like kids' clothes.
Do you really think they're willing to trade the opportunity to get rid of a prime minister that your leader says is a total failure for $250?
There's absolutely going to be an election, and Canadians are going to have a chance to voice their opinion at the polls. But listen, we're dealing with a very immediate and very real crisis of affordability for families across the country. And so our commitment that we made was that we would look at everything that the government brings forward on a case-by-case basis, and we would vote in the best interests of Canadians. Now, our leader has been very clear that an NDP government would do much more. In fact, the proposal...
But you're okay with one doing less now?
The demands that we put forward last week and continued this week went further. This is a permanent cut to the GST on essentials. The GST was never meant to be charged on essentials in the first place. So the fact that there are still kids' clothes and food products that are having GST charged on them, I think doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So we're going to make it permanent. We're going to do everything we can to get people help in the short term.
I've got a very brief sort of concluding question for both of you, and I'm not going to get down in the weeds when it comes to procedure, but our viewers now, we did a debate last night with MPs, they're familiar that the House is kind of in this state of paralysis, which means that legislation can't be introduced in the regular way. Are the Conservatives willing to allow for the possibility of this legislation being introduced? I know you're saying you're waiting until you see it to decide on it. Are you willing to do, I don't know what the rule ends up being, but what is necessary in order for that legislation to be tabled, or do you plan to block it from happening?
The House of Commons is paralyzed by the failure of the Liberals to do what they were legally ordered to do, and that's turn over documents to the law clerk to go to the RCMP in a matter that deals with a $400 million scandal. So the government can end that today. So it's the government. It's Justin Trudeau's
believe
Liberals.
Me, I asked Mark Gerritsen about that for 10 minutes last night. I'm trying to figure out for Canadians who might be watching tonight thinking, am I going to get this check? Am I going to get this break over Christmas? If the Conservatives will stand in the way, if there is a mechanism for you to do so, or whether you would allow that to happen.
The government is going to, the Liberals are going to need to look to see if the coalition agreement with the NDP is getting scotch taped back together, then they can continue to do what they have been doing and creating the conditions that have caused us to have this cost of living crisis that Canadians are facing. But in the meantime, Conservatives are determined that the House of Commons must resolve this issue, and it can only be resolved, in our view, by the government turning over the documents.
And that's why I asked those
RCMP.
questions, but I have to point out that that's not an answer about what the Conservatives would do. Final question to you from Mr. Bachrach. The NDP today said this kind of hard thing to understand, like, we're not going to support the forcing of closure to end that part of the debate, but we will introduce a motion that allows for this to all happen in one day. Do you have any sort of expert opinion that that's actually going to work, like that is possible and going to work?
Sure. We're told that it's possible. That's what we're going to try to do. We very much want to get to the bottom of the question Michael was referring to when it comes to the SDTC documents. We're not going to let the Liberal government off the hook when it comes to their scandals. At the same time, we have a responsibility to get this thing done before Christmas. And we're going to use House procedure. We're going to do everything that we can to temporarily pause the filibuster and the ongoing obstruction of the House related to the documents in order to get this done in one day so that Canadians can get financial relief in the lead up to Christmas.
and
And
if-
then we're going to go back to compelling the Liberals to produce the
If
documents.
you
and doing
can't,
our
though,
best.
are you willing to join forces with the Liberals to force closure? Like,
At-
you seem to be willing to join forces with
At
them
this
on
point, we're going to
everything.
do everything we can to use procedure to create a temporary pause and enough space for us to get the legislation passed so that Canadians can have financial relief in the lead up to Christmas. I think that's
That's
our
not an answer on
responsibility. We're going to do
closure.
our best.
Okay, both of you didn't really specifically answer the last question, but I will leave it on that note. I appreciate you making the time for the discussion. Thank you to
Thanks, Vassy.
Michael Barrett and Taylor Backrack.